SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
Thinking about a new vehicle? Trust the team that's been taking care of customers for 70 years. The Cannon family has helped thousands drive home happy. Come take a test drive today and see why. And remember, when the smoke clears, nobody beats a Cannon deal. Nobody.
Middays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. Middays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Midday SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth Studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music on this
Hump Day.
Yeah, man. Well, we got a bunch of stuff going on up there in Michigan. Looks like the primary voters in the Democratic primary have delivered a victory to the socialist Abdul El Said. We talked about that a bit yesterday. Was running against a more, shall we say, moderate, if there is such a thing, candidate for the United States Senate seat in the state of Michigan. It's being vacated. And it looks like this is kind of a high-stakes fight between left-wing and center-left establishment members of the Democratic Party. Man, even the center-left is pretty far out there these days. But El Said, clearly a nutcase and way out there to the left. He, of course, was challenged by Haley Stevens, her name. She, again, is considered a member of the House, considered more moderate, as they say. He would be the first, if he should prevail in the upcoming general election in Michigan, he would be the nation's first Muslim senator. Is an epidemiologist, ran for governor in 2018 in Michigan, did not win that particular race. He's called for abolishing immigration and customs enforcement. He's a big critic of Israel and the war with Hamas. He even characterizes Israel's actions in Gaza as genocide against Palestinians, completely ignoring what they did, the terrorists did in Israel in October a couple of years ago, where they just murdered, slaughtered innocent civilians attending an outdoor concert. And, of course, Israel rightfully, justifiably responded. But yet, he's joining in with all the nuts that took to protest. You remember that, Rhino, across our college campuses, all in favor of Palestine and the terrorists and against Israel. And it seems like every Ivy League president joined in with them, got called to the Hill, and was questioned. Just incredible, their arrogance, their hubris, their condescending, smug responses. Been a lot of turnover in those ranks since then. Of course, they were, to some extent, fomenting the reaction on their campuses. Even when you remember the protesters were like blocking routes to the classrooms for people who just wanted to, just receive what they paid for, they paid handsomely for. But these nutcases decided that, no, you're not going to go to class. And the presidents of these august Ivy League institutions let them do it. But I know I'm kind of getting off the track a little bit, but just for reference point, that's where this guy stands as well, and is now going to advance to the general election. I would say it was a bit close compared to what was expected, but last I saw, looks like he was winning by about 20,000 votes. Let's see, I've got it right here. 95% of the vote in, up by 14,000. It's the latest data I have, Rhino. Abdul El Sayed, Haley Stevens. There was a third candidate, Mallory McMorrow, peeled off 61,000 votes, or 4%.
Yeah, McMorrow technically dropped out on the 5th of last month, but it was
still
too
on the
late
ballot.
to take the name off the ballot.
Yeah. And so I think I'm right about this. No runoff in Michigan, right? Just whoever gets the most votes advances. And that's what happened. So I haven't heard anything about a runoff coming up because he did not get 50% plus. Just latest numbers show him in at 48.48%. You have to go on the other side of the decimal point because the thing's so dang close. 47.51 for Haley Stevens, again, separated by, 14,000 votes. It's incredible.
Yeah, in Michigan, the winner of a primary election is the candidate who receives the greatest number of votes cast for the office, even if they don't win an outright majority.
Okay. Different than our rules here in Mississippi, where you've got to have 50% plus one in a primary, and if you don't, you go to a runoff. So it's not just an outright winner based on having the most votes. So we'll move forward and into the general election, and that let's see, the Republican there haven't even said much about that because the Republican did not have a challenge for that particular seat, not have a challenger, so was automatically in and will take on El Sayed. I don't know that this guy with his rather radical views is Mike Rogers, by the way, who ran an uncontested race, Representative Mike Rogers. And this, by the way, is to replace retiring Senator Gary Peters, a Democrat. So if the Democrat should prevail, if it's El Sayed, which it is going to be El Sayed on the Democrat ticket as the Democrat nominee, really not a change in the balance of power. It's just you're trading in a so-called moderate Democrat. Again, caucusing with the Democrats, that's the thing you got to keep in mind is it doesn't matter if they're moderate or radical, they're going to vote with their caucus. That's just generally how it works out. So the balance of power doesn't change. But you do get like another nutcase in the U.S. Senate, as if we don't have enough. I would, however, say that maybe because he's so far out there and the fact that he didn't win this race overwhelmingly. So if you look at the Democrats that voted for...
I mean, he underperformed according to the polls leading up to the race.
That's true. And
he had a double-digit lead.
That's true. You shared that with us yesterday. And I made the comment, you still had, 8-9% undecided. That could figure in. And so you're right, though. His these actual performance and the actual finish, a little different than the polls. But I guess where I'm going here is, what do these voters that cast their ballot for the more moderate candidate here, Haley Stevens, what do what do? Do they stay at home in the general? Do they vote for it? Very contentious race. You see this a lot in contentious races is that, I'm so upset, I'm so mad, my person didn't win, I'm just going to bow this one out. So that could work against the Democrats. On the other hand, maybe it's a bunch of independents that like Stevens over the uncontested Republican candidate, and they're going to shift their vote over to the Republican. Don't really know at this point. I mean, this is all highly speculative.
I would think the voters that voted for McMorrow would be more willing to switch their votes than the other.
I would say this, though. I know we sit here and say, these people are crazy. There's no way they could win. I think we would be wrong to dismiss their radical viewpoints as
Biden won from the basement.
That's true. As unelectable, we should be paying attention. There is a significant movement in this country. I don't know if I'd say it's towards socialism, but it's towards change and stuff they'd like to see happen that's not on the Republican platform. I'll get into that a little bit on the other side of the break. Brad Bolton, President and CEO of Community Spirit Bank at 10:35.
Hello.
The talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
We're rolling. Hit it. Go. Play it.
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Well, it's all right. Riding around in the breeze. Well, it's all right. If you live the life you please. Well, it's all right. Doing the best you can. Well, it's all right. As long as you lend a hand. You can sit around and wait for the phone to ring. Someone to tell you everything. Sit around and wonder what tomorrow will bring. Maybe a diamond. Well, it's all.
We're back with you in the Element Wealth studio. We appreciate you joining. Now, the president says that Iran talks are going well. Hopes are rising for a deal in the Strait. The prospect of an interim deal focused on the Strait of Hormuz got a lot of steam yesterday after Qatar said a proposal had been drafted and both American and Iranian officials sounded hopeful. I just don't know, man. I really don't. There's been so many reports in so many different directions. This would be a 60-day agreement, so it's not anything permanent, a 60-day agreement that would allow shipping through the strait without any tolls. But I don't really understand this, but Iran says inbound vessels would use a northern lane near Iran. Outbound would use a more southern lane that would travel through Omani waters in coordination with Iran. So just saw a map on the screen on the break showing the traffic does appear to be a little more voluminous through the strait, which is good. Also got a report from our friend Steve Lott, Representative Steve Lott, who we've had on the program before, that was employed by Chevron, an engineer in the industry, knows a lot, tracks it diligently. Sent me some info this morning, said that futures essentially for regular gas, not talking about oil, crude oil, gas itself, dropped 30 cents overnight. And he was looking into it. I did a little bit after he sent this. We're not really sure what caused it. It's got to be based on some more updated inventory information that looks, I guess, a little more favorable in terms of the inventory available, demand projected. And so traders say, okay, we're going to drive the price down. So that's good news from a gas perspective. And because of this news about the Strait, the price of oil now below $80 in the mid-70s, both mid to high 70s, both the two primary traded grades, the West Texas Intermediate and the Brent C crude, which typically is slightly higher per barrel than the West Texas Intermediate version. But maybe this is good news, and this could be timely leading into the midterms. Right now, latest polls show that, crazy as it sounds, Americans trust Republicans more. Pardon me, Democrats more on managing the economy than Republicans. I think that's largely due to this spike in the price of gas and energy and the cost of living in general. And in fact, before we went to break, I was just talking about how there is some movement, I would say, in this country kind of leaning in to, I don't know if I'd call it socialism, because I don't think the average person out there really, certainly these people who are supporting these candidates, I don't think they really understand what socialism is. But the talking points used by these candidates,
they probably understand what it is in theory. They've never actually bothered to study what it does in practice.
Yes, it's 100% right. And I think that's where Republicans have got to up their game and their messaging and do a little better at that. But what seems to pop out and jump up to the top is healthcare, cost of healthcare, something we've talked about a lot. And it's this idea of Medicare for all, which is nothing new. That's been talked about for decades in this country. It's just essentially eliminating the private health insurance industry. And, well, let's put it this way. It wouldn't eliminate it if you don't want to participate. Actually, you wouldn't have a choice. You'd still pay into Medicare for all. You'd still be a participant. But you could alternatively, to what's left of the private insurance company, you could buy private insurance, and you could also seek health care from providers that don't participate in Medicare. That's a kind of bifurcation we would have and sort of restructuring of the health industry. That's what would happen. Is that not what's happened in countries, Rhino, that have socialized medicine? The same thing as Medicare for all. You've got the private health industry, private insurance, private providers, private consumers that seek their health care, receive their health care through that model because they can afford it. It costs money. They're still paying in, though.
Oh, yeah.
They're still, it doesn't work unless everybody pays in. Whether you use it or not, that's up to you. But that's what could result here. We could see the same sort of distillation of health care into that model if we implemented this Medicare for all system. And there's even been talks where, okay, it could be optional. You'd have the option to purchase the government-provided insurance, not just as one who's eligible for Medicare, which is the case today, but everybody would have that option. And, of course, it would be considerably lower than private insurance because, first, government would be subsidizing it, and secondly, and this is the thing that, to your point about folks don't know the consequences of those systems. You know this, Rhino, if we converted the entire reimbursement model to providers of health care, to the Medicare rates, we wouldn't have any more dang doctors. I'm telling you, they'd be jumping off the ship. We already have a problem, right, with recruiting physicians into the profession. and young people to become physicians and healthcare workers in general.
I mean, just take the healthcare out of it. If you listening were told, hey, you got two options. You can either go work for the rich guy and take a pay cut because he can't afford to pay you what you've been making, or we can quadruple your workload and give you the same pay cut. Which one you choosing?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're looking at. So, Saeed, as is the case with many of these far left candidates, Medicare for all is top of their list. And it's always thought that, the true way to proliferate, permeate socialism in a country is through health care, because it's pretty much something virtually everybody consumes and interacts and interfaces with. And so they've all got Medicare for all at the top of the list. Now, if you go back to the old Hillary Care days, that's what her idea was, and that couldn't even get traction in the Democrat Party. I dare say today, Rhino, maybe every Democrat sitting in the U.S. Congress would vote for a Medicare for all plan. You think? I believe that.
Oh, yeah, because the Democrat Party of Bill Clinton's era is nothing like the Democrat Party of today.
It's gone. Totally gone. So
all the sanity got washed out of their empty skulls.
I remember, exactly right. I remember distinctly that direct question being asked to all of the candidates for president during a Democratic debate in the 2020 cycle. I think it was CNN maybe that hosted the debate, and there were, 10 or so candidates up there. Trying to think of the list. We remember Bernie Sanders was in there. Wasn't Liz Warren a candidate back then? But what I remember, what I recall, in that, and that was before, of course, the field had narrowed and folks were dropping out and so forth after the primary. But what I recall is that question being asked very directly, and every single one of them said, "Yeah, I'm for Medicare for all." And if I'm not mistaken, yeah, that was the cycle. I couldn't remember which cycle. It was Tulsi Gabbard who said, yeah, I'm for Medicare for all. Remember, she was a Democrat at one point. Yeah, Amy Klobuchar, Liz Warren, Joe Biden, Michael Bloomberg, Pete Buttigieg, Michael Bennett, Andrew Yang, remember him? Every one of them said it. Coming right back with Brad Bolton, president of Community Spirit Bank. Stay with us.
From the seat. Okay, is everybody ready?
I'm ready. Ready here.
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. We're pleased to welcome now Brad Bolton, the president and CEO of Community Spirit Bank. Hey, Brad, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thank you for having me. Always good to see you.
All right, so we wanted to have you on to talk about this story that kind of shocked us all, is the Jackson area Federal Credit Union that suffered $95 million of fraud. First, Brad, explain to the folks what exactly is a credit union. I think a lot of people who don't engage with credit unions and don't have relationships may not understand what they are. How do they differ from banks? And then tell us how the regulation and oversight over a traditional bank contrasts to regulation and oversight of a credit union?
Well, credit unions were created in the 30s by an act of Congress, and they were created as a cooperative that would serve people of a common bond and of modest means. And so that's how they were originally set up, was if you had a company called XYZ Company, they would have the XYZ Credit Union, and that credit union would just serve that company and the people working for that company. And because they were set up that way, they were set up as a tax-exempt entity. So they don't pay any federal, state, local taxes, especially if they're a federal credit union. So that's, number one, they were set up by that charter, and they were tax-exempt. So through the years, we call it mission creep. They've continued to try to expand out, and they start serving, everyone in their community, or, they're a community credit union, but yet they never lost their tax exempt status along the way. Whereas a community bank like myself, serving Northeast Mississippi, Northwest Alabama, we pay local, state, federal taxes every day. And so the disparity between a tax-paying community bank and a tax-exempt credit union is unbelievable, because we're competing against them every day, yet they're paying no taxes. And so ultimately what happened here in this situation was that you had a huge embezzlement of a executive of this credit union, is why community bankers like me are calling on Congress to finally wake up and see what's going on in the credit union space, and ultimately hold hearings to say credit union executives should be required to file a 990 form, which tells the executive compensation of those members. And I'm sure we'll get into that today.
Yeah. So what really kind of shocked people across Mississippi is the size and scale of this fraud and the length of time that it had been occurring undetected. What's going on here?
So I'm a $225 million asset community bank. This credit union was only about $170 million in total assets that they had under their management. And the embezzlement totaled $95 million is what the last report that I read. It's staggering. It's unbelievable that went on for so long, because apparently this started in 2015 when Ms. Bridges was a CFO of this institution, and it went unchecked, unnoticed, until it finally failed in June of 26, whenever the National Credit Union Association took over, the NCUA took over and put this credit union into conservatorship. So you got to ask, where was the regulators over these past, decade? Where was the auditors? Where was the oversight of fellow employees, and where was the board that's supposed to be seeing this kind of stuff happen? Yeah.
So I don't even see how financially it could survive, given the size of that institution and the amount of money that was essentially taken from it through this embezzlement fraud scheme. How in the world does it survive for that period of time? How are they doing it?
Well, they had to be cooking the books. I mean, there's no other way around it. You had to be filing fictitious, call reports, which we all have to file a call report with our federal officials every quarter to tell the financial standing of the bank. But you got to have auditors that's involved in this that are missing things. And obviously fellow employees are ignoring the warning signs. I mean, there was reports that they were paying $18 million credit card bills for this person, and, buying properties on the coast, and, luxurious cars, and so on and so forth. So it just screams that where was the regulators? How did they miss it? Because I'm examined every 18 months.
Sure.
If I'm a safe and sound institution, and the regulators come in and they leave no stone unturned as far as looking into our books, and as auditors as well. I mean, we have to have an opinion audit every year. So
well, that's what I was about to ask you.
Failures along the way.
Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you. That's what I was about to ask. These folks are subject to a third-party audit, right, by a credentialed, certified public accounting firm. How could they not see this?
Yeah, it's just staggering and mind-blowing of where the regulators were and where the auditors were of the checks and balances. I mean, I've got an internal auditing firm that audits our books as well. So We've got so many checks and balances. The NCUA's own regulator once said that the credit union regulator was the regulatory blind spot of the industry when it comes to cybersecurity and auditing and things of that nature. So this is a glaring example of that. But I think that you don't need to lose the sight of the fact that credit unions as a not-for-profit are the only not-for-profit other than churches that don't have to disclose the executive compensation of their bank executives.
Right.
Now, that should concern everyone. And if that would have happened during this 10, 15-year period of time that this was going on, that would have been great warning signs for the credit union members to say, wait a minute, this executive was making how much? And, being able to see the full picture of that. So that's what we're asking for the regulators and for Congress to, hold hearings on this to finally make credit unions publicize the executives just like every other not-for-profit in this country.
Man. Well, are you talking to, would this be something, Brad, that would have to be implemented into law and then passed in and codified into regulation at the federal level, I'm assuming? Or could this be done at the state level?
At the present time, the U.S. Treasury is doing a 990 transparency review. So they're seeing all of these not-for-profits across the country. And they're actually deciding right now, should we expand the scope of this to change how people has to report their earnings and their financial disclosures on a 990 form. It's time for the Treasury, first of all, to step up and say, you know what, we're going to take a review that credit unions are no longer the cooperative that Congress, passed them to be years ago. And we need to see a full picture and disclosure of this. Navy Federal Credit Union is one of the largest credit unions in the nation, but yet nothing is disclosed as far as their executive compensation or their overall standing. So, it's just truly staggering.
Explain, Brad, why is it important to disclose executive compensation with respect to just maintaining the integrity of these institutions?
Well, it's just to be fully transparent. That's what we want, is just transparency. So credit unions are supposedly owned by their members, right? They're a cooperative. And so they should be accountable to those members. But instead, they're out buying other community banks. They're out putting naming rights to huge stadiums. They're doing all of these things like a for-profit entity, but yet they have the tax shelter that Congress put in place years ago. And it's truly just a mission creep. So we need Congress to act, to hold hearings, to see if credit unions truly are living up to their mission of serving people of a common bond and of modest means. I don't think a credit union buying a bank in Florida that specializes in airplane lending is any more serving people of modest means than anything.
Well, not only that's not consistent with the whole conceptual design of credit unions. That's not what they were designed for. They were designed to kind of operate as almost a benefit to employees of a company, where you could contribute to it, and it would be there at your disposal for maybe below market interest rates on loans, et cetera, for things that they could finance, not meant to be a competitor and a replacement to traditional commercial bank.
Well, credit unions have grown exponentially, about a 400% increase in total assets since 2000 alone. They're up to like $2.4 trillion in assets, and they pay zero tax dollars on that. Community banks across the country, we paid $15.4 billion in taxes last year alone. So Can you imagine what these large credit unions are avoiding in both state and federal taxes? In fact, in Mississippi alone, credit unions cost your state about $10.2 million in lost revenue, but yet they're out here competing against me every day and coming at the expense of local infrastructure and the public safety that protects them, just like they protect me.
Yeah.
But I'm paying my fair share, and they're not.
I understand. Brad Bolton, President and CEO of Community Spirit Bank, has been our guest. Appreciate you coming on, Brad. Enjoyed the discussion.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, sir.
Yes, sir. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
For flipping good.
It's so awesome!
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Come on, let's get on with the show!
On SuperTalk,
Welcome back, everyone. It's middays. We are in the Element Wealth studio. Rhino, why does it always seem like the crazy financial impropriety always happens in the nonprofits? You know what I mean? When you're in business for a profit, the government would be an example. When you're in business for a profit, if there's an integrity problem, you ain't lasting very long. That kind of crap don't go on for 3 and 4 years in the real world private sector. You get your head chopped off.
Well, I think part of it is most of the fraud associated with nonprofits deals with ideologically captured nonprofits. They believe in their whatever cause more than the average worker in a typical for-profit business cares about the profit of that business. They care about their cause more than their own well-being sometimes. So when something happens, they're more likely to ignore it or sweep it under the rug because it might hurt their cause.
That's a good point. So it's all about the cause.
And because of that understanding of human nature, bad actors tend to gravitate towards nonprofits as a way to have ill-gotten gains because they know if I'm acting as a bad actor within an organization that really cares about this cause, then they're going to look the other way because they don't want me hurting the cause.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's unfortunate, and that's a shame, and it certainly shouldn't be that way. Wow. So I appreciate Brad. So I have a friend in North Mississippi that suggested Brad as a guest to us to come on and discuss this issue. He had done a lot of work on it, as you could tell. He is an advocate for some change, and I agree with him. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't think he would have a problem, and I wouldn't have a problem if the credit union stayed in their swim lane. We're going to make you a nonprofit, thus you're exempt from taxes. But that's, as you say, for the cause. But right, you're getting out of your cause swim lane when you're buying financial institutions that are financing airplanes or whatever it was. That's beyond the original purpose, intent, and scope of a credit union. And they should not, on that basis, have those kinds of exemptions, not only from a tax perspective, but from an oversight perspective. That's not right. So I hope that our Congress acts on this. That's certainly a problem. And I guess it took this $95 million of fraud to kind of highlight it, right? And bring it to light that we got a problem here. So we talk a lot about taxes on this program. Here's a report I just caught overnight. Rhino, this is information, once again, that I'm not making up. You know that. I've researched this stuff. And what really aggravates folks, especially on the left, is that the source of a lot of this information I share is the United States government. It's their data. I'm not making this stuff up. So if it's wrong, blame it on the government. Now, they may say, yeah, you can do that because Donald Trump's in office. That's horse hockey. We've been doing this when Joe Biden was in office as well, and we were able to point out and use and share information produced by the federal agency complex charged with tracking this sort of stuff. But here's one for you. We pay more in taxes than we spend on food, clothing, and housing. Think about that. $8.192 billion on taxes, $7.3 billion spent, almost 7.4 on housing, clothing, and food. You know, the necessities of life. So the tax bill exceeds the cost of housing, food, and clothing. And that's been going on, and the gap actually has been increasing since 2000. The lines did cross where we were spending more on food, housing, and clothing, believe it or not, in 2010. That lasted until about 2012. And then the gap began to widen, and now we have an $804 billion disparate amount of money we spend. Coming right back with MJ Kirby, Director of Children's Services at Mississippi's Mental of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher and president.
Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's hour 2 of Middays from the Element Wealth Studio on this
Hump Day.
We're pleased to welcome now MJ Kirby, Director of Children's Services and Quality Assurance at South Mississippi Mental Health Center. MJ, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so mental health is something that I think has gotten more attention in our society maybe than, let's say, a couple of decades ago, or maybe even a decade ago. It seems like it's been destigmatized, I would say, to a great extent. I think we probably have some work to do there, but I think that's the case, and I think people are more aware that it comes in many forms. It affects everybody. It doesn't matter what your circumstances are. And it's certainly something that we need to be concerned about with respect to our youth. It's a big, wild, crazy world out there. In the old days, you could shield youth from a lot of things that were inappropriate, that to keep that from impacting them from say just a mental health perspective. But nowadays, that's almost impossible with the advent of so much digital content. So we got school underway, coming up, different schedules around the state. But this is an issue that schools are having to grapple with young folks, right?
Absolutely. And I think you're right. The stigma is lessening, and so that's good news for us. However, as you mentioned, children are not inherently weaker than they were in previous generations. I think they've inherited a difficult set of circumstances, a total landscape shift, something that we did not experience growing up. And no previous generation before about 2010 experienced what Jonathan Haidt in The Anxious Generation calls replacing a play-based childhood with a phone-based childhood. So we have some work to do for sure.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I think about my own childhood, obviously, long before we had all that. And, back then it was my parents were always kicking me out of the house. Go out and play. Not that I wanted to stay in the house, but maybe if I was in between, whatever the activities were, it was always get out of the house. And I think that was common. But nowadays we're all concerned about safety and allowing our kids to be out of our sight. But I got to tell you, I was 8 and 10 years old roaming around the neighborhood. I wasn't in the sight of my parents. There was never any problem. Nobody worried about that. But our world's a little bit more dangerous today.
It is. And, I have memories similar, getting kicked out into the backyard, from the water hose, creative play, imagination. We played all day long. And the streetlights came on, and then we were back home.
Yeah.
And yes, there is inherent different kinds of predatorial risk. But also, I think the more we move away from a play-based childhood, the more difficult things are becoming for children. In 2023, our Surgeon General, Dr. Vickett, issued a 19-page advisory warning of the perverse effects of social media on the forming of young minds. And so I think we really need to pay attention to not only the mental aspects, but the literal rewiring of our ability to pay attention. And children need to be outside and touch grass and play. And so I guess the question becomes, and this is not a moral judgment, but monitoring how many hours a day your child is consuming social media versus how many hours a day they're playing outside. Yeah. And you may need to reverse that trend a little bit in your own home.
So what are you hearing from teachers, educators, administrators in the K through 12 environment that they're having to manage and navigate this issue? What are they saying, and what are some of the solutions?
They're very stressed. I've spent a lot of time doing professional development for teachers. I just did Pascagoula School District's convocation, and afterwards a lot of teachers came up and said, what you said completely resonates with me. The attention span of the children is a lot less than it was, helping them remain engaged. And then they're not just being called to be educators. You know, they're nurses, they're social workers, they're conflict resolution keepers. We've expanded the expectations of our teachers as the growing world of childhood has eclipsed and changed, really. And so the expectation on the teachers has risen. And as you're describing, I don't know that we've found a solution for this quite yet, but I'm hopeful places like Australia that are embarking on legislation that limits social media to the age of 16. I think that's really important. Things like this will help reframe the conversation in America if we can get some legislatures on board too.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. So, are you working with the legislature, MJ? Do you support some more restrictions than we currently have with respect to electronic devices, smartphones being carried around by students at school?
You know, I do, and the thing is, we don't have a problem having a drinking age. You know, we're not going to let a kid, they can get it in other sources, but we're not going to let a kid buy vape at the pick-a-pack store until they're of age. And yet they're walking around with unfettered violence, pornography, cyberbullying, predators in their pocket. And unfortunately, we're just not able to closely monitor what they're seeing. And so I'm not trying to limit liberty for limiting sake. You know, we'll let adults make improper choices, you know, for various reasons. But children, we have a duty of care to protect them. There's a funny story my aunts tell about when I was little, like 2 years old, 3 years old, coming down the street to my grandmother's house. I was standing in the front seat always, waving, looking for them. Now, I don't think my mom didn't care about me, and so she didn't put me in a car seat. I think we just didn't know at that time that car seats and seatbelts were something we needed. And so now I think technology has advanced so quickly that we need to put some guardrails in place.
Yeah, and of course, as you know, in Australia, I think that the age is 16. Below 16, the person is not able to access those sites, I believe, or have phones. I can't remember if it was just regulating social media or the actual device itself. But they're holding the platforms responsible, and that gets a little tricky and expensive, as you know. I kind of wonder, most of those tools have parental controls. Where are the parents in this? Why aren't they stepping in and managing that?
You know, and I think everybody has a part to play in this. You've got the parent lane. You've got the duty to care from the tech companies in the $290 billion advertising industry that they have. Yeah. And then you have legislatures. And so societally, we all have to come together to shore this up. When my children were coming of age, they were right on that cusp of that big shift. And so my child was 14 in 2010. And we just made a household rule that you didn't get a phone until Christmas of your 13th year. Now looking back, I would have qualified that with possibly a phone at 13. That's a flip phone, not an iPhone. So, you know, parents have got to get involved.
Yeah. Yeah, and that seems to be a never-ending challenge, is it not? I mean, I certainly hear that from educators that, it's hard for them to manage in the classroom when they don't get the sort of support they need at home.
Absolutely. And so again, it goes back to we've got to build up our protective factors for our children, and that's including parents. The educators are protective factors, places of connection like the Boy Scouts, church youth groups, athletics, extracurricular activities. These used to be common. Connection was, more embedded in a child's life. And now slowly, unfortunately, that connection is being replaced by social media consumption. So really, a lot of what I talk about is a call back to embodied connection.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes total sense. Well, it's hard enough being a child, and when you're a child, I like to say your job is to learn. That's kind of your job at that point, and be developed so that you can be a self-sufficient, a happy, and productive member of society. But when you got all these distractions in the way, it just makes that harder. You got about 30 seconds.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So.
Well, and there's warning signs that you can look for as a parent. If you're concerned about how this is affecting them. Okay. Maybe we can talk about that on another show.
No, if you can hang around, we can let you talk about that now since we got you. If you can hang around, we can go through through the break and get you on the other side.
Sure thing.
Okay. MJ Kirby, South Mississippi Mental Health Center, coming right back.
When it comes to mental...
Interrupt this program. Gerard Gibert. Here we go.
This is huge news. Huge news. You need to listen to this.
Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
We are back in the Element Wealth studio. We're visiting with MJ Kirby, Director of Children's Services and Quality Assurance at South Mississippi Mental Health Center. So, MJ, before we went to break, we were just talking about, hey, how can parents, how can families detect in their own households maybe where there's an issue with a child that obviously isn't going to say anything, but maybe some indicators, right, that are showing that this child needs help.
Yes, absolutely. And the good news is you don't have to have a mental health certification to be able to notice warning signs. It's really just about paying attention. And I tell parents to think about it in 4 buckets. You're looking for emotional changes. Do they seem more depressed or anxious? Are they less interested in things that used to interest them? So we're thinking emotionally, how are they feeling? How are they responding to you? Behaviorally, are they acting different? Are they eating less? Are their grades stopping? Are they sleeping more? Are they not coming down for dinner? These kind of behavioral things can be a big clue. A big one for children, especially teenagers, is socially speaking. And we know developmentally, that age starts to kind of pull away from the family, trying to be their own autonomous person. But if you've noticed a distinct disturbance, they're isolating themselves even more. They've pulled away from a friend group and have a whole new set of friends. These are things you need to pay attention to. And as you've noted, verbal clues are usually the last to come. And so you've got to be picking up these other clues before it gets to the verbal, I can't do this anymore. Because that's usually the way it happens. You have a series of nonverbal cues that eventually end in this sort of crisis place where they really need your help.
So one of the things that we certainly shared and discussed many times on this program, at least between Rhino and I, is just how the traditional nuclear family has experienced a breakdown in our country and in our state. And in fact, last data that I reviewed, MJ, indicates that about 46% of the children in the state of Mississippi live in a fatherless home. We're top of the list. among the 50 states in that. And that certainly, I want to point this out, that does not mean that a child cannot be raised in a loving, nurturing, positive, rewarding environment with a single mother. It happens every day. And these single mothers sacrifice a lot. I personally witnessed. I think we could all find those in our inner orbit that are. But statistics show it's more difficult. It's just a child that's raised in a fatherless home has a higher probability of being a problem as an adult and not achieving and realizing their fullest potential. And I guess where I'm going with this is this seems like maybe it's a factor here as well, possibly.
Yeah, and I think also it's important to note, not only is there sort of a loosening of the basic fabrics of family units, there's a redirecting of, again, I'm going to use that word, connection. Families used to sit around a table. There were no phones, and there was a moment of connection with the mother, the father, the parents in the home, the grandparents if they were raising the children. These organic moments of connection are missing. Andy Stanley does a lot of work on this. Drive time. If your dad is taking you to school, there's that drive time for you to be in organic place with him to talk about things. Yeah. Bedtime. Who's tucking you in? Do you have someone tucking you in? Mealtime. I think we have a basic connection problem, and it goes beyond whatever your family looks like. We have just lost our way connectionally, I think.
Well, that makes total sense. So, is there something, I guess, that could be, like I said, a factor in a child's mental health when certainly there's a problem at home? I hear a lot of teachers talk about children coming to school hungry, for an example. Yes. Which is just mind-boggling to me that we have children in this state, but it's absolutely true. We've talked to the folks that are involved in trying to help out families that need something to eat, need food. We have a lot of hungry people, which is just shocking to me in the state. But that's an example. Or that there is some strife within the marriage at home that also is a problem. The child tends to check out. And is got to affect them mentally. How do we deal with all that?
It absolutely is affecting children. We expect them to come to school and perform their best on an empty stomach, when a lot of children that I've counseled tell me the only meal that they're going to get today is the meal in the school cafeteria. That's why Backpack Buddies programs are so important, to send children home with a backpack full of some food to nourish them over the weekend. And then you've talked about strife, domestic violence, psychological and emotional violence. The children are not only inherited a heavier load, but they're expected to carry it into a school that's demanding higher performance and standards. And I think we've really got to look at the whole child and see if their performance is partially related to the fact, and their mental health, of what's going on inside the home that they're being raised in. Yeah.
And we, of course, we're so grateful for our good friends at the Palmer Home for Children, who just does a fantastic job of stepping in sometimes circumstances. And sometimes it's not necessarily negative. It's just that the family's struggling to raise the child properly, and they recognize that. And so maybe for a short period of time, they take up residence in the Palmer home so that child can be nurtured and developed and lead them down a successful path, and then hopefully reunite with the family. But I guess where I'm going with this is, if a child experiences these kinds of hardships and I say unusual in that I just believe a child's life ought to be about playing and having fun and going to school, and shouldn't have to deal with grown-up problems. They'll have plenty of time for that. They're much likely, I believe, to be a successful adult if they have a childhood where they're shielded from all that to a great extent, like the crazy stuff on their smartphones that you were talking about earlier. But can they be salvaged, I guess, if they've had that maybe through the young ages, and then all of a sudden maybe they come into your care or the care of mental health professionals? can we treat salvage? Can we get them on the right track and hopefully turn that around?
I wouldn't be in the work that I'm in if I didn't believe they were salvageable. I have a lot of hope for children, and they are extremely resilient, much more resilient than most adults. I've seen children come through things that they should not have had to bear, a burden that was horrible. Like you wonder, how will they recover from this? And through therapy, through having protective factors in place, like the Palmer House, through caring educators, through the bus driver that remembers their name, through all these protective factors that can be placed around a hurting child, they can rise to the occasion and become more than they would have been had they not received that kind of help. And one thing that we all can do as a parent, if you're concerned about your child or as an adult that cares about children, every child needs somebody that's going to listen to them, somewhere they feel like they're safe and they belong, and something to believe in. And those aren't things that are hard to instill in your child.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, totally. So, children, they thrive on affirmation. They want to be recognized. They want to be affirmed. They want to do good things and be recognized for doing good things. I think that's almost kind of a travesty a lot of times, MJ, when you have these sort of dysfunctional households and children are doing well, they're performing well, but nobody's paying attention. Nobody's recognizing that. They need. You're a child. You do need a pat on the back, a pat on the head as a child. As an adult, that's a different thing. You got to start learning how to self-actualize yourself, as Maslow famously said in his hierarchy. But as a child, no, you need adults around you to recognize, right?
Absolutely. And as you're noting, it is so sad that we do have a lot of Mississippi children that are growing up in an environment, and I'm not even going to blame, I'm just going to say they're growing up in an environment where they're not able to self-actualize. They're not hearing, "Atta girl, I love you, you belong here, we're going to get through this together." But what I do see, and I think this is the growing challenge for educators, is in a lot of ways they're filling that gap. And so not only are they teaching academics, but they are providing a safe space where the student in their classroom knows they belong, they know their name, they know what shoes are their favorite shoes. They provide that attaboy environment that is sometimes missing in a home.
Yeah, and I'm grateful for that, and that's huge. But it doesn't start when the bell rings and stop when the bell rings. It's got to continue, right? And that's what we got to assure.
Absolutely.
But yep. Appreciate you being with us. MJ Kirby, South Mississippi Mental Health Center, has been our guest. She's the Director of Children's Services Quality Assurance. Thanks for coming on, MJ. Enjoyed it.
Thanks so much.
Appreciate it. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Gerard Gibert. He keeps his classified documents right where they belong. Inside a Journey record jacket from the 1980s. Gerard Gibert. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. Are you thinking about or planning for retirement? Do you have a plan? Go to myelementwealth.com or call 601-957-6006 to let Element Wealth help you find your balance between income, growth, and guarantees. You know, one thing that has certainly divided the red states from the blue is income taxes and taxes in general. where the blue states are rushing to implement and dream up all kinds of new taxes and increase existing taxes. But there's a move in red states, including here in the state of Mississippi, to reduce the tax bite. You're seeing candidates for governor, for example, talk about that here in Mississippi. But yesterday, Missouri residents went to the ballot box to vote on a measure that, they still have that in Missouri. Something we don't have here in the state of Mississippi is the old ballot measure process. And this measure asked voters whether the state should phase out the graduated income tax, which, by the way, has a top rate of 4.7%. Just to contrast that to the state of Mississippi, our top rate this year is 4%, as we are in the third year of the bill passed, what was it, Rhino, 21, 22, that took our income tax down to 4%. It first eliminated the 3% bracket. Then it took the 5%, the old 5% bracket. It used to be 3, 4, 5. 3% on the first $10,000 of taxable income, 4% on the next $10,000 of taxable income, 5% on all taxable income above 20. So what we did is years ago, like in the teens, we got rid of the 3%. That's at the same when I remember back then Tate Reeves, our governor, was the lieutenant governor. He was a champion of that policy, which also phased out the stupidest tax of all, the franchise tax. Got rid of that, got rid of the 3%. And then after that, the back in 22, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, I can't remember the exact year, we got rid of the 3%, the 4%, got rid of the 3%, and then got rid of the 4%, phasing out the 5% down to 4%. So a bill years ago that got rid of the franchise tax also got rid of the 3. Then a subsequent measure, 2021 or 2, was passed that eliminated the 4%, phased our 5% down to 4. That's where we are now. We're in year 3 of that. It was over a 4-year period. Get rid of the 4 and then reduce the 5 to 4. That's where we are now, at 4. Next year, the bill that passed in 2025 that ultimately is designed to phase out, eliminate our income tax, it kicks in. So right now we're at 4%. Next year we go to 3.75, and then 3.5, then 3.25, then 3, terminates at 3. Then the triggers kick in that further reduce the 3% bracket on an annual basis by as much as 0.3%. Would take 10 years in total to eliminate then the remaining 3% bracket, which is where we'll be in 4 years. But that requires meeting some financial tests. But you guys recall there was a drafting error and a misplacement of the decimal point in that legislation. You've said many times, Rhino, you don't feel sorry for the Senate and for the lieutenant governor because you had plenty of opportunity and plenty of eyes that looked at this thing and you just blew it. And you don't. And your point about not feeling sorry is when the Senate did a mea culpa with the House and said, "Hey guys, this isn't what we wanted. We blew it. Will you let us redraft it?" They said, right? And move forward. And then we had the big signing celebration out on the lawn of the mansion because this is something that the governor desperately wanted to do. I say desperate. He very passionately wanted to do. He wasn't desperate for anything, but this was a big thing that he thought would move Mississippi forward. And I agree. I think eliminating the income tax is something that is good policy. But Missouri residents said no, and here's why. Because this measure would have also increased sales taxes and use taxes. Now, Missouri's rate right now, they have 4.7%. And so there are those who said, yeah, we got to have some offsetting revenue, and the only other source we have, the same way it works in Mississippi, is with sales and use taxes. In Mississippi, there is no offsetting increase in sales taxes as part of the measure that passed in 2025 that ultimately phases out, eliminates the income tax. But it's also done over 14 years. So it ain't like you got time to pivot if necessary. And also you're allowing what hopefully will be an increase in the tax base through economic development. And by increasing the tax base, we're talking about you're spending more money and thus generating more sales tax to offset the reduction of income tax revenue as the rates go down. Well, in Missouri, it was thought that even though the proponent of this measure, the proponents in their legislature that referred it to the ballot, even though they said, yeah, we think we'd have to go from, I think their current sales tax is fairly low, like in Missouri, at the state portion of the sales tax is 4.225%. Just bear in mind that in Mississippi it's 7%, but they also have local options. We don't have a lot of that. You and I looked at it. I think we have 2 in Mississippi, right? I'm not talking about restaurant and lodging layered on sales taxes. We're talking about just everyday stuff. We have one in Jackson and one in Tupelo, as I recall. So, but this is very common in other states. Our neighboring states, for example, you go to Mobile, you're paying 10.5%. It's over 10% in Memphis. It's the same in New Orleans. So virtually all of those states have layered on local sales taxes. So that you can't be fooled by just looking at the state portion of that and comparing that. You've got to look at the total, all in. What are you paying at the cash register to really do an accurate and meaningful comparison? But I was shocked at the margin of this vote. 83% of Missouri voters said no. We don't want to eliminate the income tax if it means increasing sales taxes. Now, the proponents of this bill said, oh, but we'd only raise it to about 6%. So go from 4.2 and change to 6. But there was this group that organized in opposition of this measure called the Missouri Budget Project. And they said, no, you'd have to raise it to about 10%. Or significantly expand the goods and services purchased that are subject to sales taxes. And that's what spooked people, and that's why this thing failed yesterday. So I think what people want is they want you to eliminate the income tax here. And I'd say that's the same case in Mississippi, but they don't want to pay any additional higher taxes elsewhere. In the case of the state, the only other major source of revenue is sales taxes. And nobody wants to pay higher sales taxes. So my personal thoughts are that unless we get out there and spend a whole bunch more money, or a whole bunch of people move into this state and spend money, we're probably going to struggle to make the budget work once our income tax revenues experience significant decline as a result of the reduction of the income tax. Now, political candidates won't tell you this. They just want you to believe what they say, and they essentially want to buy your vote. I'm going to do this with your taxes and that with your taxes, yet they really haven't done the math on that. And I would say anybody that proposes those kinds of reforms should supply a working 10-year state budget to show those reforms, those reductions, those loss of revenues baked in. Coming right back.
Covering the stories that matter most to Mississippians. Gerard Gibert. Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. Thank you for joining us today. So, you kind of think sometimes that we're sort of on the other side of this woke stuff and cancel culture and this obsession with race and gender and all the crazy stuff. I've said before that the Democrats say they worship at the altar of climate change, race, and radical gender ideology. I do believe that. And I guess I was optimistic that maybe we're not so obsessed with that and so focused on that. And then all of a sudden, something crosses my feed, and I just kind of shake my head and say, well, I guess that was premature to think that we were past that. So I found this little video that I'm going to ask Rhino to play, and it's the Denver City Council. And you just got to listen to it. They're having this debate at the top of the meeting here that honestly focuses on everything but taking care of the business of the city of Denver.
Family's history. And my dad was a migrant worker and grew up working in the fields. And so I see this and I also think of an experience of Colorado and of what my family has experienced. And I'm asking, was there consideration of expanding or broadening to be able to reflect that?
No, I think we thought about it in the same way that we did the land acknowledgement in terms of foundational, the foundational experience within this country. And so the labor being specific to those that were taken from Africa onto this continent, and that labor being forced.
Do you know of another city that names a perpetrator group? So the phrase at the hands of white Americans. I know that there are a bunch of labor acknowledgments that talk about systems like white settler colonialism, but it doesn't talk about groups. Historically, the family of labor acknowledgments tend to talk more about systems instead of groups.
Yeah, so again, the language came from examples from all across the country that we had kind of put together. I would imagine that is probably uncomfortable, but in the conversations that we had, no one had pulled that out specifically to say, hey, can we look at this language and do something differently?
So, just to clarify it for you, I know it's kind of hard to follow there, but this is a Denver City Council meeting, and these are members of the City Council, and they already have, I didn't know this, but they already have land acknowledgments before they start their meeting. They then, as it's being reported, they talk about how terrible the country is, but what they're talking about is adding a slavery acknowledgement. And they can't agree on the language that they should use for this slavery acknowledgement. When the hell do they talk about, I don't know, like water and crime and things like the zoning, things like that? We got to talk about land. I'm laughing because of the insanity, the absurdity. And again, they're so serious about something you shouldn't even be talking about, much less be serious.
They've got to make sure they've got the proper woke liturgy for their woke religion.
And what they're debating, by the way, is whether or not it's inclusive enough. It's the language. That's just incredible. So, again, I'm sorry to report, just as you think that we're past this, these people are elected. They are paid with tax dollars.
I hate to break it to you, but crazy people stay crazy. They very rarely get cured of the insanity that put them in the crazy bin to begin with.
That's a good point.
Case in point, there are still silver-haired hippies running around that are convinced make love, not war is the end-all, be-all statement of a lifetime.
I'm sorry to say that not only are you right, unfortunately, you're referring to my generation. I just want to say for the record, I'm not part of those crazy people. I was blessed with, I'll say I was blessed with fabulous parents. And the most fabulous that one could ever hope to be, their mom and dad. And they steered me away from that nonsense and that crap. So I appreciate that, Al and Marie Gibert, for seeing to that. God bless you, and tell God hello for me. Coming right back after Fox News and SuperTalk News.
Yeah, do the mess around. Everybody's doing the mess around.
And now, another hour of the talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Begin your transition now.
Now on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's hour 3, the afternoon portion of Middays from the Element Wealth Studio on this
Hump Day.
So on the C-Spire text line, Jeff in Carrollton says, just curious, how do the states that do not have state income tax compensate for the loss of revenue? Higher sales taxes or what? Yeah, let's take the state of Texas, for example. The sales taxes comprise, just as they do in Mississippi, their largest source of revenue with respect to the state budget. But the state of Texas has something that is a bit unique relative to the other states, and just in terms of the sheer scope and volume, and that is a very robust oil and natural gas industry. And there's significant severance taxes levied on crude oil and natural gas that fluctuate with energy. And those revenues are directed to the state of Texas, to the state government. They also have vehicle sales taxes that are higher, that produce revenue at the state level. But they've got something we got rid of here in Mississippi that is the dumbest tax ever, and that's franchise tax. And it's levied on gross receipts of eligible corporate and business entities. In the state of Mississippi, the franchise tax also levied on capital equipment, which was just a dumb tax in my view. And that is being, I believe it's been totally phased out, Rhino, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, we're currently phasing it out. The rate in 26 is 50 cents per $1,000 of capital employed in excess of $100,000. That is completely eliminated by 2028. But the state of Texas has a very robust and almost punitive franchise tax. The state of Texas also has considerably higher real property taxes than we do in this state. Here's the bottom line. It's not like that Texas and Tennessee and Florida, just to name 3 states that don't have an income tax, it's not like they've just cracked the code. They figured out a way to operate with less money. That's not the case. They've just figured out a different way to raise the money that they need and they spend in their operation. So it's a matter of pick your poison. You want franchise taxes or income taxes? Do you want a high oil and natural gas tax? I don't think the folks in that industry in our state would be too happy about that. But consider the fact that these models have been in place for a long time. And when you start changing models up, unless it's a way that's just a sheer cut, it's not received very well. And that's what happened in Missouri, where 83% yesterday of the voters said, yep, we're not for eliminating the income tax if it means you're going to increase sales taxes. So if, as is the case in Missouri, Texas, Mississippi, virtually every state, sales taxes, that's the primary source of revenue. Income taxes are in second place. I haven't actually checked California, New York, Connecticut, Illinois, Rhino, where the income taxes are outrageously high. It may be different there. But, you know, they also spend a whole bunch more money, and they spend a whole bunch more money per capita than didn't we do a report on, like, the state of Florida's, the state's general fund budget, I believe, is smaller than New York City's. And New York City is just one city with about a third of the population of the state of New York. So it's insane. Texas's budget is $250 billion in total revenue. That's how much they take in. But a lot of that comes from the federal government. That's the case in every state. And that's why I've said many times, if the federal government balanced its budget by cutting spending, every state budget in America would crash, including Mississippi. Because what that would mean if they balanced the budget is cutting much of the funds for programs and other uses, other targets that flow to the states. The state of Mississippi is heavily reliant on federal money. We get, just like Texas, we get more money from the Fed than we raise from state taxing systems. It's about $12 billion versus our $7.3 billion state budget. So if the federal government sharpened its pencil and got its act together and started to truly reduce spending, I don't mean, and I'm not trying to minimize $1 billion, but when you got a $7.5 trillion budget, yeah, that's less than petty cash. Until you start talking in terms of hundreds of billions and trillions, you ain't serious. Not when you got a $2 trillion deficit. So, and some of that's like our interest. We talked about that yesterday. You can't change that. That keeps going up. You keep borrowing more money. We have to pay more interest. And the day we default, the entire global economy will crash. What? The U.S. doesn't stand behind its obligations? That would absolutely kill the global economy. No doubt about it. But the only reason that we or any other state are able to eliminate our income tax and cut taxes is because the federal government doesn't cut its budget. We are only able to maintain the budget we do because of the budget the federal government maintains, which produces a $2 trillion deficit. That's why we balance our budget, because the federal government doesn't. The day they start balancing the budget, then we'd have to figure out where are we going to get that money from. Now, you could say, we'll shut down the Medicaid program. Well, that would be bad news for the healthcare industry as long as they still have to take care of people who can't pay. As long as that law is on the books, that passed under Ronald Reagan in 1986, the Emergency Medical and Labor Act, that's Emergency Treatment and Labor Act is what it stands for, EMTALA. That's something passed under 86. It basically says you show up in the ER and you're sick, whether you can pay or not, we're going to take care of you. And as long as that law's on the books, you don't have a free market in health care, and somebody's going to have to pay for it. Right now, it's a combination of us paying for it in our commercial premiums and the federal government providing what they call disproportionate share payments that does cover some of those costs. Not fully. The only point I'm making is if the 700,000 people on Medicaid in the state of Mississippi suddenly lost it because the federal government got out of the Medicaid business in an effort to balance its budget, that's an $8.5 billion program that either we'd have to pay for, that's $7.5 billion the federal government sends us, or $7 billion. We'd either have to pay for that, or we just have to tell those people you don't have insurance, but when they show up in the ER, they're going to get treatment. That's the conundrum of all this. But again, I just want to point out, it's not like Florida is just smarter than we are. Man, how are they able to operate without an income tax? They also have, we looked it up, like 40 million, some insane number of people that visit the state of Florida every year because they got beaches and attractions. And guess what they do when they're there? Spend a bunch of money, and that generates taxes. We don't have that. We have a robust tourism industry, but let's be honest, it ain't on the level with Florida. It's not going to be. It's not a knock on the state of Mississippi, and our folks do a great job, our tourism folks. And we have a lot of great stuff, but it ain't quite like Florida. It's just not. One thing they have is year-round delightful weather for much of the state, and so they attract a lot of people from the north that come down. And it's wealthy people, and while they're there, they just open up their wallets, and that generates an enormous amount. So Florida's got that, and Texas has oil and gas, for what it's worth. Tennessee, by the way, has higher sales taxes, considerably higher sales taxes, and that generates a lot of revenue for the state of Tennessee. They also have a fairly robust tourism industry as well. You know what else they got, Rhino? Lots of corporate taxpayers that pay C-Corp taxes. We don't have that either because we don't have a lot of corporate headquarters. The only point I'm making is it's not like these folks have got some magic formula. Pick your poison. You're going to pay one way or another. They hadn't figured out a way to spend less on education or less on health care or less on corrections. In fact, it's quite the opposite, as you know, Rhino. They spend more than we do. So it's not like they're just these spending thrift wonks whatsoever. They just have a different revenue model than we do. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Interrupt this program.
Gerard Gibert.
Here we go. This is huge news. Huge news. You need to listen to this.
MidDays with Gerard. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
You'll never make a sane man.
Back with you on the C Spire text line. That's 601-879-4395. Gary in the Berg says this interview is a very important conversation to have. One of your best. Thanks, Gary. Appreciate that, Gary. We're talking about the interview we had earlier on the program with MJ Kirby, Director of Children's Services and Quality Assurance at South Mississippi Mental Health Center. It's a huge problem, not just in our state, but in our country. And I do think, Rhino, that to some extent we have destigmatized it, or certainly we've worked as a society to destigmatize mental illness because it comes in many forms. And it affects people that you may not even know is affecting them. But I think folks are speaking up. They're more aware, and they are getting appropriate treatment, which I think is a good thing. And we're talking about it like we did today. And I think there was a time when you just didn't talk about it. Now, I'm not so sure that I agree with the trend, as you recall, Rhino, back from the 80s when society just decided that even folks who had mental issues and mental challenges should be so-called assimilated, when in some cases, sadly, these people indicated the possible or the possibility of becoming violent. And we've seen that with some of the crazy mass killings and events that have occurred. You're usually dealing with somebody who's got a short circuit that you've known about and had all the warning signs, but were available and free to move about society when they probably should not have been, honestly. But the idea, I guess, of confining them to an asylum, as we called them back then, an institution, was just considered inhumane, and it was thought that no, they would potentially overcome whatever this challenge is by just being part of mainstream society. But I don't think that's always been the best thing.
I believe that experiment has been proven false.
Right.
Because I go back to my previous statement, most crazy people never get cured of the craziness.
Yeah, I agree. It's like...
But as a society, we've gotten to the point where at least a portion of the society is going to castigate you for being mean for just using the word crazy.
That's absolutely true. And that's, again, I think that it's one of those things where maybe the effort and the idea was noble, but it wasn't practical. And it didn't produce the best value, the best outcomes overall for society. And I would argue that it's not even noble. I'm just saying that's what the way they frame it and the way they justified it.
Well, like the vast majority of instances where bleeding hearts lead the charge and change, they missed the forest for the trees. They were seeing abuses and neglect and insane asylums run by the government and thought, oh, we got to let these people out.
That's totally right.
Without recognizing, no, the problem was you had the government running something, and the government sucks at running anything.
It's 100% right. And I got to tell you, my wife likes to watch, what's the dang program that comes on where they go looking for haunted situations? You know what I'm talking about, the two young guys that run around, find all these various haunted spaces or something like that. I can't remember. It's on Discovery or one of those programs. But it turns out that many of the episodes feature them at night, of course, roaming through an insane asylum, an asylum. And, I guess it's thought that where... at least the people that study all that or into all that, my wife's kind of one of them, that whenever you have sort of an unusual passing from life to the afterlife, that's where you're more likely to have some sort of haunt, some sort of spirit. And that happened a lot in those institutions. To your point, because government was running it, they didn't know what the hell they were doing, and you did have some bad situations. But the solution wasn't to shut them down. The solution was to improve the management. But we didn't do that. We decided, oh, no, we know that they have a problem, but we're just going to introduce them and insert them into mainstream society, and then we wonder why they go crazy and play shoot 'em up. It's happened over and over again. It's like this recent rash of 3 or 4 situations of mass killings involving these transgender people. They're already screwed up in the head, but society's told us, oh, no, they don't have a short circuit. They don't have a miswiring. They don't need mental treatment and therapy. We've got to let the dudes in the dresses go to the girls' bathroom. You're freaking asking for it when you do that. Is that not what's happened?
It's precisely what's happened.
But
we've allowed the feelings of a portion of society to override the logic of the majority of society.
Totally true. Logic is a good point. Logic out the window. Forget the logic. We got to worry about the feelings. Feelings aren't always logical. Sometimes your brain just ain't working right. It's okay. Let's get you help. Not rush you down to the hospital where they'll whack off your genitals. That's what was happening. And then by the time they hit adulthood, they're miserable. And they want out. The vast majority. And it ain't that easy. It's not that reversible. In fact, I'm not sure it's totally reversible whatsoever. And then you wonder why they go do crazy things. Because you ignored the true core problem, which is something ain't working right upstairs. And that's translated to your body. That's the way we're made. I know I'm on a rant somewhat on that, but I just couldn't help but think about how we turn things upside down in this respect. And we created a less safe society as a result of trying to be virtuous. And, you know, it's the people that promote and champion these virtues. They got a short circuit because they're looking for some sort of personal gratification and personal edification out of that. Like, go find something else besides that. And it's because you really don't want to go work hard at something else. So you find this and you pat yourself on the back, I guess, and feel good about it. Yet you're harming society in doing so.
Some people argue that, and I don't know that I buy into this a whole lot, but it's worth bringing up. Some people argue that the decrease in childbearing, the decrease in childbirth,
the birth rate,
has led to an increase in the over-mothering of society. When mothers, fathers don't have children to rear and raise, they put those maternalistic and paternalistic instincts towards sometimes complete strangers.
Yeah. Exactly right. So, but you ain't got but one real mother. That's part of the problem. But the left in this country, they want government, essentially, to stand in as your mother.
Or at the very least, to divide you away from your family. That's why in the LGBT blah, 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 blah community, they have this concept of chosen family. When your biological family doesn't 100% align with your beliefs and stances and nonsense, then you cut them off.
That's
and you
so
go
true.
with your chosen family.
That is so true. Yeah. Well, I'm glad, like I said, we're talking about it now. Yeah, Keith and JS says, that's right, Ghost Adventures. That's the name of the program. The main guy, Zach. I always laugh when I'm watching it because they'll be going through somewhere, him and his partner. Did you hear that? And it's like, yeah, they're telling us to get out of here. How do you know that? It's just like indiscernible gibberish. But what made me think about it is apparently there are lots of this paranormal activity in the old asylums, which all just got shut down. It looks like you just left them as is when they're going through them. Everything's still kind of in place.
It's a big government building that got abandoned decades ago.
Exactly
as a person who has done a bit of urban adventuring into abandoned places,
okay,
the main reason those TV shows have any engagement is because they're filmed at night. If you film those things in the daytime, it would be laughable.
You're probably right.
Because it goes from dilapidated in the daytime to creepy at night.
That's exactly right. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Middays with Gerard.
Good for America. Good for fans of justice and truth. Good for us.
SuperTalk, Mississippi.
This is what we stand for.
Oh, mama, I can hear you you're crying, you're so scared and all alone. Hangman is coming down from the gallows, and I don't have very long.
We're back with you in the Element Wealth studio on the C Spire text line. Someone said, my dad always talking about you got the 8 to 8 when you're at school, and hopefully the children are getting the nurturing and the attention and the affirmation that a child needs. But, you know, what concerns me is when they go home. Is that continuing, or has that been eroded, and is there a void there? Says, my dad always took me to the old Seal Lily ice cream shop on Northview Drive after school. As long as I didn't tell my mom, we went next door to the Dutch bar. So, okay, I have to tell him myself a little bit. I know exactly where he's talking about on Northview Drive, not far from the old Meadowbrook Mark there in that little area. And you're right. That's when Seal Lily, Seal Lily, the ice cream maker, they had a retail store there, an ice cream shop, and it was awesome. That was a big treat for us as well. I lived over in the poor section of town in West Jackson, but we'd often drive over there. My dad would load up my mom and I and my brother before we went off, and head over there on Sunday afternoon and enjoy the Seal Lily delicacies. But right next door was this place called the Dutch Bar. And when I was in high school, that's where we hung out as well. I mainly hung out in there because that's when foosball was popular. And I got to be pretty good at foosball. And they had a softball foosball table. You had the hard balls and you had the soft balls. And if you could master the softballs, you could spin the heck out of those dudes. So we'd have some epic softball, foosball matches. They'd have tournaments, and even though I know it's not legal, folks would actually bet on the tournaments, and so I'd have a bunch of people behind me, a bunch of people behind my opponent. But the Dutch Bar featured that, but that was a very popular hangout. Even though you had to be 18 to buy beer then, you could still get in because they sold food. It was a grill in a bar, but it mainly was there for the beer. But I'm not telling you whether or not they would sell beer to the high school kids. But they had one hell of a foosball table. I know that. Had a lot of fun. But you're right. Right next to I missed those. I appreciate you bringing that up. Right next to the Seal Lily ice cream shop there. Yeah, which was really cool.
The funny thing about Seal Lily, as far as my lifetime is concerned, is they were out of business before I was born.
Okay, yeah.
But I did have a friend whose parents were apparently a big fan, and in the back of their freezer, I don't know what they were saving it for, maybe the end of the world, they had a little pint of Seal Lily, what was it, orange cool, orange chill, something like that.
Yeah.
That they had stuck back in the back of the freezer that had like moved 3 houses with them. That they hadn't stuck back just in case. And my friend showed it to me one time, and I was like, what is that?
Yeah, orange pineapple. And they had an orange sherbet. They had all the above. Who could forget TV personality Woody Asaph? I want to say that Bob Neblett is the one I remember. Also was involved in the Seal Lily ice cream promotion as well. He was the weather man when I was a kid over on WJTV. But they had a lot of interesting flavors. There's one in particular I'm trying to remember, like a something nut, walnut, something like that flavor that was unique that I don't remember that anybody else had. You had to go to Seal Lily to get it. Yeah, the name escapes me. They're kind of famous for whatever that was, some sort of nut flavor. Maybe somebody will remember it and let me know. But, yeah, good stuff. Let's see what else we got. Could it be possible, this is Paula Meridian, that some of these people in the asylums where they died, that those people were possessed by demons, and when they died, the demons stayed? I don't know. I just know that it's thought by paranormal experts that anytime you have kind of an unusual and really more of a premature death, that you're likely to have paranormal activity. And it is true that in these asylums, you had lots of folks who did pass away at a young age before their time, and thus and there were some other atrocities really committed, but as you say, because it was bad, dumb government, they do dumb things, and so thus it's believed that sort of traps the paranormal states and spirits and stuff like that, and that's why that Zach and his ghost adventures, it seemed like every other episode was another tour at night, as you say, through one of these facilities. And I was telling Rhino on the break, what I remember about the show is they'd always set it up by showing you an image where you could see the entire asylum during the daytime. And it's just giant buildings, all overgrown and boarded up and windows out and just dilapidated and falling apart.
In the industry, that's called an establishing shot.
Oh, okay.
You're establishing the location.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, sure. So
like during a sitcom, before you go into the living room, you have the establishing shot of the outside of the house. Like Married with Children, you got the outside of the house, and then cut to Bundy on the couch.
Okay. Just as they teach us in the talking business, and I know in the speaking business, you're supposed to use words and phrases and statements that paint a picture, right, that evoke an image in your head. It just makes it more interesting. So maybe we just did there, but with respect to that. But, yeah, maybe it was black walnuts, what Jack and Jacktown said. That sounds right.
That's the fascinating thing about the paranormal to me, because I'm a cynic. I've been a cynic for a long, long time when it comes to the paranormal and the supernatural and all that. But it is fascinating watching different areas of study, different expertise, try to filter observed phenomenon through their understanding. And you have everything from the theological concepts of, is this a war with demons, and is the demon still attached to the real world because of their disconnect from the person due to an untimely death, or is it the physics of it? Is there something in the Higgs boson or in the quantum strings that connect it? Like all these different takes on the same thing. That's what fascinates me more than people with a GoPro at a spooky asylum.
So you would be referring to, of course, Zach and his partner and partners with all these electronic gadgets. Just always cracks me up that there would just be some gibberish coming across on one of those gadgets, and then when they would share with the audience, did you hear that? And it'd be like a paragraph came out of 3 seconds of noise. Oh my gosh! But look, if it pays the bills and the people watch it and the advertisers are buying the show, that's all that matters. That's the way it works, man. That's what's cool. Rhino was telling me earlier, you got to tell the folks about this new Roku AI exclusive content channel. What's that all about?
Yeah, if you have a Roku TV or a Roku little dongle plugged into your smart TV or your TV in general, they have a new channel that I think it debuted a couple days ago. It's channel 300 on Roku. It's called Fairground AI. And Fairground is a company that has gotten together and built up a model of, hey, if you're a content creator or you're a creative or you've got an idea and you've generated your idea into an AI movie, we want to see it. So that you go into their creator portal, you upload your AI-generated video or movie or TV show or whatever, and it goes through a panel that they have to make sure it's worthy for air, it's not just complete slop, it's not nonsense. And then they'll start broadcasting it to their partners like Roku who then have ads running on it. They get paid. You get paid. But, yeah, it's a complete channel 24/7 of nothing but AI-generated content generated by creators that aren't tied to Roku, aren't tied to Fairground's not generating this. These are just people that have already generated it in their free time or as an exercise in understanding AI. And it's pretty cool because if you think about it, if you think about someone that, say, when you were 10 years old, you wrote a story about your imaginary friend, but you can't draw. You don't have the skills to go in and render it in 3D, and you certainly don't have the money to hire actors to act it out. But you can figure out a prompt and have AI generate it, and if it's good enough, you can have it out there, and you can be making money on your idea you had when you were 10.
I think it's great. It's just another example of technology launching new occupations because of new services. And, there'll be people that will gladly consume that, right? That makes Roku more valuable. Coming right back with the final segment.
In life,
stories that matter most to Mississippians. Gerard Gibert, Middays with Gerard, SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Patrick in Louisville says, funny how Bigfoot shows are always at night, too. Yeah, there's something about the night, right, that just makes it a little bit more intriguing. Of course, the cemetery up behind the Tad Pad at Ole Miss is thought to be haunted, and when I was a student up there, that was always a big challenge. Would you go walk through the cemetery, there, which is got some young people that died in the Civil War. That's what it's there for. That's positioned on that little plot of land there.
But like I was saying during one of the breaks, the difference in the night and day at, say, an abandoned asylum or a cemetery, or you're out Bigfoot hunting in the woods. Say you're out Bigfoot hunting in the woods in the daytime, and the deer that steps on the twig 50 yards behind you that makes a snapping noise, and you turn around and look, and it's daylight, so you can see the deer. Or the squirrel chewing on an acorn and drops it, and it hits a knot on the bottom of the tree and makes a loud noise. You look over and you see the squirrel. Well, you can instantly see where the sound came from. You go out in the woods at night looking for Bigfoot, and that same deer steps on that same twig 50 yards away, but it's pitch black and you can't see it. Well, that was something walking behind you, and you can't see it. So instantly you have that little tingle on the back of your neck, the hair stand up. Or the squirrel drops the acorn, and you look and, well, you can't see the squirrel, so something's moving over there. So it's that ingrained primal fear of the dark that just gets plucked by the producers and directors of these shows.
Argo in Blue Springs says, I live beside a cemetery, and at night sometimes some weird sounds come from over there. One thing I agree with my wife, who's big into this, just kind of as a hobby, and has read a bunch, and studied a bunch, and shared some of these stories. Her take on it is, look, I just think there's some stuff we just can't explain. And you can try to explain, and you can't. And we have tried to explain lots of this stuff.
Like how early people knew how to watch the weather. That's both a lost art, because before meteorologists were broadcasting the weather over the airwaves and on your TV, you had to be able to keep up with it on a more personal level. You weren't able to just rely on an expert to tell you what it was going to be like.
Yeah.
But part of that also came from generation after generation of understanding, well, you just got to watch the animals.
Right.
When a big storm's coming, they act differently. And with all the scientific know-how in the world we have today, we still don't have a conclusive, this is the genome in that animal that makes them do that. We don't know. We just know there's a change in the air, there's a change in the atmosphere, and the animals feel it, and the animals take notice.
So it's an example of something that we've observed that says, yeah, it's like clockwork. It's reliable. When they behave this way, that means there's some weather is on the horizon. But
for
we
a less
just
kind of example, Tylenol. Tylenol's been around for, 100 years?
Yeah.
Acetaminophen?
Yeah.
I think it's been available as Tylenol for longer than I've been alive. We know acetaminophen will knock out a fever. We know it helps with pain. We know a lot of the things it can do. Even today, modern medicine, modern science cannot tell you how it works. We do not know how Tylenol works. We
I
just
didn't know that.
It works.
I absolutely didn't know that. That's interesting because when I was a kid, I was allergic to aspirin. And that's really where Tylenol was popular for those who were allergic to aspirin as a pain reliever, fever reliever, inflammation as well, right? So I didn't know that. So we don't really understand the science behind why it works.
No.
Just can't explain it.
But we have decades of observable interactions with it to go, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
It's safe for that, it's safe for that, it's not safe for that.
Yeah, exactly. Interesting.
That's why they call it the practice of medicine.
Yeah, you're right about that.
Because there's a lot more to it than they're willing to admit publicly, that they just don't have a 100% grounded understanding of it. They've observed it enough to know how the vast majority of people react, but they still don't know why.
Interesting. We got to go today, but just shifting gears a second, we were talking about taxes earlier, and I don't want to get to this tomorrow when you guys tune in, just some of the commitments, shall we say, made by candidates with respect to taxes here in the state of Mississippi. And I would just encourage everyone to step back and think about the need to do some math. This is a math problem. Taxes and spending and budgets are. On the C Spire text line, someone said Mississippi's also looking at having a sales tax on property sales of home or farmland, 1 or 2%. I've not seen any talks about that, any legislation, any serious discussion. Says it happened in Madison County, but hasn't shared with whom. Out of here today, back tomorrow. Stay safe and God bless everyone.
A SuperTalk Mississippi media production.